Good morning. Nice to see you. Happy Tuesday. We're in the Gospel of John. We're really entering an interesting question or story today about the woman caught in adultery. And it follows on, I think, as the genius of the person that compiled the Gospel of John well knew. It follows on the sort of the contempt that we talked about yesterday. And the contempt of the high priests and the Pharisees were showing towards Jesus, and even towards the law, when Nicodemus encouraged, said, hey, look at, right, well, we got a law, let's stick with that. And they're like, what, are you from Galilee? Are you from Galilee? Mocking him. Is anything good come out of Galilee? Has a prophet ever come out of Galilee? Right? Not understanding the power of God. Right? So it doesn't matter where you're from. And what makes Jesus more amazing is the fact that he is this prophet that came out of Galilee. Now, we also know that scripturally he is tied to the words in Micah about being born in Bethlehem. So he does have that. He is a prophet that comes not originally out of Galilee, but formed by Galilee, by the fishermen, by the beautiful pastoral scenes of Galilee, the history of Galilee, but the Babylonian exiles returning into Galilee, a gorgeous place that formed him into an extraordinary, to Jesus. Anyway, let's read this part about the woman caught in adultery, unpack it a little bit today. Gospel of John, chapter 8. It says, then each of them went home. Those are the people that were gathered around Jesus at the temple, while Jesus went up to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and he began to teach. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And making her stand before them all, they said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say? They said this to test Jesus, so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. So I'm going to stop there for a second and unpack this. So they had a sense of Jesus, didn't they? So they said, here's a woman who was caught in the very act of adultery, an entirely unjust law, because the woman, of course, receives a sentence of death. We see that right here in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 6. Right here, 5. If a person is caught in adultery, then you shall bring out your gates that man or that woman who has committed this crime, and you shall stone the man or woman to death. On evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, the death sentence shall be executed. Now it's interesting, they only bring a woman to Jesus, right? Not the man and the woman. We're assuming it takes 2 to commit adultery, and yet the Pharisees at the time only bring the woman, not the woman and the man. Who knows what happened to him? It continues on in Deuteronomy 17, verse 6. A person must be put to death on evidence. A person must not be put to death on evidence of only one witness. The hands of the witness, this is interesting, the hands of the witness shall be the first raised against the person to execute the death penalty. Afterward, the hands of all people. So what the law is the witnesses who found the person committing the crime, whatever the crime is, in this case, the crime of adultery, they're the ones who have to say, I bear witness to this crime, right? Now, the punishment for lying, of course, is death to them. So here we are. They bring just the woman, not both, in front of Jesus. They have a sense that Jesus has a heart for people, that Jesus is against death, that Jesus is a forgiving person. They've listened to what he's teaching, and yet they know that if he doesn't abide by the law of adultery, then they can bring that charge against him for breaking the law, right? For siding with the criminal, the bad guy in this case, the woman caught in adultery. And what Jesus does is he kneels down and he writes in the ground, and they keep questioning him. This is super interesting. So I'm going to put a pin in this. Think about Jesus getting down and writing in the ground. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. But what I want to say and leave you with today is this idea of unequal justice, right? And how 2,000 years ago, a woman caught in a mutual crime is the only one that's called out. How often does that happen in our culture today? That people, because of who they are or their relative lack of power, become the victims in the institution of power. And people with power are free to move away. So I would wonder about that, right? If you're looking for something to contemplate over the next day till we get together again tomorrow. Where have you been victimized because of who you are, your gender or your context, where you came from? Did you come from Galilee? And where have you been blind to someone else's lack of power and what that leaves them into in their own life? Just something to wonder about. I think about you. I pray for you. I pray for our congregation. I miss seeing you. I love you. See you tomorrow. Peace upon your soul.